An exhausted single mother drifted off on a stranger's shoulder during a crowded bus ride. But what he did next left everyone watching with tears in their eyes. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Chicago, winter of 2008. The city lay buried under a merciless snowfall, white flakes swirling against the gray sky like tiny fragments of forgotten dreams. Caroline Foster, 26 years old, nervously adjusted the worn burgundy apron of the Magnolia Diner, her fingers working automatically at the frayed edges. The gold-plated name tag, the only thing remotely fancy about her uniform, caught the dim light of the elevator as it ascended toward the 35th floor. Her heart pounded against her ribs. In her threadbare purse lay the small white stick that had changed everything just 72 hours ago. 2 pink lines, no ambiguity there. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime, revealing a reception area of gleaming marble and modern art pieces that probably cost more than her annual salary. A sleek, impeccably dressed receptionist glanced up, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising slightly at Caroline's attire. "I'm here to see Alexander Wright," Caroline said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's expecting me." She wasn't sure if that was true. Their 3-month relationship had been conducted in shadows, dinners at obscure restaurants, weekends at out-of-town hotels, always on his terms, always at hours that ensured minimum exposure. But she'd texted him that morning, "Need to see you. Important." His reply had been terse. "Office, 5 p.m. "Your name?" The receptionist's voice held the faintest edge of disdain. "Caroline Foster." After a brief call, Caroline was ushered down a hallway lined with awards and financial magazine covers featuring Alexander's confident smile and piercing blue eyes. The contrast between her world and his had never felt so stark. Her hands, slightly reddened from refilling countless coffee cups, against the pristine white walls adorned with abstract art pieces. Alexander's corner office offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Lake Michigan, now a vast expanse of gray beneath the winter sky. He stood with his back to the door, a silhouette of power in a perfectly tailored suit, gazing out at the city he seemed to command. "Alex," Caroline said softly. He turned, and for a brief moment, his face showed genuine pleasure before immediately morphing into something more controlled, more distant. His eyes dropped to her uniform, then back to her face. "Caroline, I didn't expect you to come straight from work." His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice that had whispered against her neck in darkened rooms, now coolly professional. "My shift ended at 4. I didn't have time to go home and change." She clutched her purse tighter, the pregnancy test like a burning coal inside it. Alexander gestured toward a sleek leather couch. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you." Caroline sat, feeling the luxurious leather beneath her, so different from the cracked vinyl booths where she spent her days serving others. Alexander didn't join her on the couch. Instead, he perched on the edge of his desk, creating distance between them. His Hermes tie, a gift from his mother he'd once told her, was the exact shade of his eyes. Everything about him was deliberate, curated. "You said it was important," he prompted, glancing at his watch, a subtle reminder that his time was valuable, measured in thousands of dollars per hour. Caroline took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Alex." The words hung in the air between them like icicles, sharp, transparent, dangerous. Alexander's face went completely still. The only movement was a slight adjustment of his tie, fingers smoothing imaginary wrinkles. He stepped back, as if pregnancy might be contagious. "Pregnant?" His voice was so low she barely heard it. "That's unexpected. How far along?" 8 weeks. Alexander walked to the window, putting his back to her again. Outside, snowflakes swirled more violently now, a gathering storm. "This wasn't in my plans, Caroline." His reflection in the glass looked troubled, calculating. "I'm being considered for the Fortune 500 this year, the youngest CEO ever to make the list." "I'm not asking for anything," Caroline said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I just thought you should know." He turned back toward her, his face now composed into a mask of regret that didn't reach his eyes. "You understand my position. The right name carries expectations, responsibilities." Caroline said nothing, waiting for the words she already sensed were coming. "You're a waitress, Caroline." The word fell from his lips like something distasteful. "You come from a family with no connections, no formal education beyond high school." Each word hit like a physical blow. Caroline felt her eyes beginning to water but blinked rapidly, refusing to cry. "What did you think would happen between us?" Alexander continued, his voice growing colder. "That I, heir to the right fortune, would introduce a suburban waitress as the mother of my child to my board members, to my family?" Caroline stood, her legs trembling slightly. "I didn't come here with expectations, Alexander. I came because you deserved to know. And now I know." He returned to his desk, putting the massive mahogany structure between them like a fortress wall. "Let's be practical about this. These situations arise. They can be handled discreetly." "Situations," Caroline repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "The truth is," Alexander said, looking directly at her now, "you're boring, Caroline. Convenient for a few nights, but insufficient for anything beyond that." The cruelty of his words stole her breath. 3 months of whispered promises, of shared secrets in the darkness, of what she had naively believed was something special, all of it disintegrating before her eyes. Alexander opened a drawer and removed an Italian leather wallet. With deliberate movements, he extracted several bills and placed them on the coffee table between them. $5,000, he said, his voice businesslike. "Take care of the problem and don't contact me again." Caroline stared at the money, feeling something inside her harden into resolve. She made no move to take it. "Nothing to say?" Alexander raised an eyebrow. "I thought you'd be relieved. This solution benefits us both. You can move on with your life without the burden of single motherhood, and I can continue building my legacy without complications." Caroline finally found her voice. "My child isn't a complication to be solved with cash." "Your child?" Alexander laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Caroline, be realistic. You make what, $20,000 a year? Live in a rented apartment in Wicker Park? How will you provide for a child? Daycare alone would eat half your income." His dismissive assessment of her life, though accurate, sparked something defiant in Caroline. She straightened her shoulders, the apron of the Magnolia Diner suddenly feeling like armor rather than a mark of subservience. "I'll manage," she said simply. Alexander sighed, checking his watch again. "I have a conference call with Tokyo in 10 minutes. Take the money, Caroline. It's more than fair." Caroline walked to the door, leaving the cash untouched on the table. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet but clear. "You're wrong about me, Alex. I'm not insufficient, and someday you'll realize what you threw away." "Dramatic exits won't change reality," Alexander called after her. "The offer stands for a week. After that, don't expect anything from me." Caroline walked through the reception area with her head high, though her vision blurred with unshed tears. The elegant receptionist barely glanced up, already dismissing the waitress who clearly didn't belong in their rarefied world. The elevator doors closed, and only then did Caroline allow the first tear to fall, quickly wiping it away with the back of her hand. As the floors counted down, so did her disintegrating dreams of what might have been. Outside, the snow had intensified, the wind cutting through her thin coat. Caroline pulled it tighter around herself, one hand instinctively moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered to the life growing inside her. The small apartment in Wicker Park felt emptier than usual that night. Caroline moved through it like a ghost, methodically removing her uniform, showering away the scent of diner food and finally collapsing onto her bed. The next morning, she packed Alexander's money into an envelope and mailed it back with a single line: "My child has no price." The following weeks became a nightmare of logistics. At 3 months, when her pregnancy became noticeable, the manager of the Magnolia Diner called her into the cramped back office. "Customers don't like being served by pregnant women, honey," she said, not unkindly. "It makes them uncomfortable. Your last day will be Friday." Caroline found work at a laundromat during the day and cleaning offices at night. The physical toll was enormous, but each night she returned to her small apartment, made notes in a cheap notebook about budgeting and childcare options, and fell asleep with her hand protectively covering her growing belly. When Olivia was born on a rainy June day, the delivery room held no supportive partner, no excited grandparents, just an overworked nurse who kindly held Caroline's hand during the final pushes and placed the tiny, perfect baby on her chest. "Hello, Olivia," Caroline whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're going to be okay, I promise." 3 months later, with bills mounting and no family support, Caroline faced the humiliation of applying for government assistance. Sitting in the crowded social services office, nursing Olivia beneath a thin blanket, she glanced up at the waiting room television. There, on the screen, was Alexander Wright's confident smile, being celebrated on the cover of Forbes as Wall Street's prodigy. The caption noted his recent engagement to Victoria Pembroke, heiress to a banking fortune. Caroline looked down at Olivia, her tiny face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the father who had dismissed her existence with cash. The breaking point came that evening. After 16 hours of work, laundry during the day, office cleaning at night, Caroline returned home to find her apartment flooded from a burst pipe. Water soaked through everything: the second-hand crib, the few baby clothes she'd managed to afford, the notebooks containing her plans for a better future. Cradling Olivia in a blanket, Caroline sat on the fire escape and allowed herself to cry one last time. "It's over," she whispered to herself, watching the city lights blur through her tears. "This is the last day Alexander Wright will have power over me." The next morning, with Olivia sleeping in a makeshift carrier, Caroline enrolled in night business classes at the local community college. While her daughter napped in a repurposed drawer at the back of the library, she devoured books on entrepreneurship and finance, filling notebooks with ideas and plans. An old sewing machine purchased from a thrift store for $47 became her first piece of equipment. Late at night, after Olivia was asleep, Caroline began experimenting with designs, her fingers pricked and bandaged, but her resolve unbroken. "One day, you'll look at me and realize the biggest mistake of your life," she promised, kissing Olivia's forehead as she typed out a business plan on a public library computer. As the winter snow began to fall again, marking a year since that devastating meeting in Alexander's office, Caroline Foster was already laying the foundation of what would become her empire. While drying her tears on that winter night, Caroline couldn't imagine that in 15 years she would be signing billion-dollar contracts on the same floor where Alexander had declared her insignificant. While drying her tears on that winter night, Caroline couldn't imagine that in 15 years she would be signing billion-dollar contracts on the same floor where Alexander had declared her insignificant. But first, she had to survive tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days that would follow with a child depending solely on her. The alarm clock shrieked at 5:30 in the morning. Caroline's hand shot out from beneath the thin blanket, silencing it before it could wake Olivia, who slept peacefully in the second-hand crib, just feet away. February in Chicago was brutally cold, and the apartment's heating system worked sporadically at best. Caroline dressed quickly in the dark, layering sweaters beneath her Magnolia Diner uniform. She leaned over Olivia's crib, placing a gentle kiss on her daughter's forehead. "Just a few more days, little one," she whispered. "Mommy will find something better." Mrs. Petrovich from next door would arrive at 6 to watch Olivia, a kindness Caroline repaid by bringing home leftover pies and doing the elderly woman's laundry on weekends. These makeshift arrangements were the threads holding her fragile existence together. The morning rush at the diner was particularly hectic. Caroline moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile never betraying the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She was 12 weeks pregnant now, and though she'd tried to conceal it with looser uniforms, her body was beginning to betray her secret. "Caroline, my office. Now." Brenda, the manager, beckoned her with a crooked finger during a rare lull. The cramped back office smelled of cigarettes and burnt coffee. Brenda sat heavily in her creaking chair, regarding Caroline with a mixture of irritation and reluctant sympathy. "You're showing, honey. No preamble, just blunt observation. Customers don't like being served by pregnant women. Makes them uncomfortable." She sighed, tapping a cigarette against the desk. "Your last day will be Friday." Caroline felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Brenda, please. I need this job. I have a baby at home already." "Which is exactly why you should have been more careful, isn't it?" Brenda lit the cigarette, blowing smoke toward the yellowed ceiling. "Nothing personal. It's business." Walking back onto the floor, Caroline moved mechanically between tables, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, her mind racing with desperate calculations. Rent due in 2 weeks. Formula for Olivia. Prenatal vitamins she couldn't afford to skip. That evening, after collecting Olivia from Mrs. Petrovich, Caroline spread the classifieds across her kitchen table, circling possibilities with a pen that was running out of ink. She needed something, anything, that would hire a visibly pregnant woman with a baby. The laundromat on Damen Avenue didn't care about her pregnancy. "Can you sort, load, and fold?" asked the manager, a heavy-set woman named Gloria. "Can you work 8 hours on your feet?" "Yes," Caroline answered without hesitation, though she wasn't entirely sure. "Starts tomorrow. $7 an hour, no benefits." It wasn't enough, but it was something. The steam from the industrial machines made Caroline dizzy during her shifts. The constant bending and lifting sent pain shooting through her lower back. But she endured, eating saltines in the break room to settle her stomach, resting her swollen feet whenever Gloria wasn't watching. But even with the laundry job, the numbers didn't add up. After her shift ended at 4, Caroline began cleaning offices in a downtown building, emptying trash cans, vacuuming carpets, scrubbing toilets. The cleaning company didn't ask questions. They merely handed her a key card and a list of tasks. One night, while emptying the trash in a corner office not unlike Alexander's, Caroline found a discarded business magazine. His face stared up at her from the glossy pages, captioned, "Rising Star of Finance." She crumpled it viciously, shoving it deep into the trash bag. In the bathroom mirror at the office building, Caroline hardly recognized herself. Dark circles underscored her eyes. Her uniform strained against her growing belly. Her hands, once soft and smooth, were now red and chapped from industrial cleaning solutions. "You'll never be good enough for someone like him," she told her reflection, echoing Alexander's unspoken assessment. Then, straightening her shoulders, and thank God for that. June arrived with oppressive humidity that made the laundromat nearly unbearable. Caroline was 8 months pregnant now, her body unwieldy and aching. Gloria had reduced her hours, claiming customer complaints, though Caroline suspected it was fear of liability should she collapse on the job. "You should be on maternity leave," Mrs. Petrovich scolded, watching Caroline massage her swollen ankles after an evening shift. "Maternity leave is for women with benefits," Caroline replied, attempting a smile. "And husbands." The contractions began during her night cleaning shift. Caroline gripped the edge of a desk, breathing through the pain, determined to finish her tasks. By the time she returned home, they were coming every 20 minutes. She called Mrs. Petrovich, who promised to care for Olivia, and then dialed for a taxi to the county hospital. The delivery room was stark and clinical. No flowers, no balloons, no anxious father pacing the hallway. Just Caroline, gripping the bed rails during contractions, and the night nurse named Susan who'd taken pity on her. "Where's your support person, honey?" Susan asked, checking the fetal monitor. "It's just me," Caroline answered between gasps. Susan's face softened. She reached out, taking Caroline's hand in hers. "Not tonight. Tonight, it's us." For 7 hours, Susan stayed beyond her shift, holding Caroline's hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, encouraging her when she thought she couldn't push anymore. And when the baby finally emerged, red-faced and indignant at being thrust into the world, it was Susan who placed the tiny girl on Caroline's chest. "Hello, Olivia," Caroline whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're going to be okay, I promise." Later, alone in the recovery room with her newborn, Caroline felt a strange mixture of terror and determination. "Somos só nós duas agora, pequena," she whispered in the Portuguese her grandmother had taught her. "But I promise that will be enough." Returning to the apartment with a newborn while caring for a 9-month-old tested the limits of Caroline's endurance. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. The cleaning company had replaced her during her brief hospital stay. The laundromat offered only part-time hours. By August, Caroline faced the reality that she couldn't make rent. The social services office buzzed with fluorescent lights and quiet desperation. Caroline sat in a hard plastic chair, Olivia nursing beneath a thin blanket, while toddler Olivia played with a worn picture book at her feet. The forms in Caroline's lap asked for information she was ashamed to provide. Income, nearly none. Savings, depleted. Father's information, absent. Foster? The intake worker, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, called her name. As Caroline gathered her children and diaper bag, her gaze caught the waiting room television. There, in full color, was Alexander Wright receiving some finance award, his new fiancée, a willowy blonde, applauding at his side. The caption identified him as Wall Street's prodigy, celebrating his company's meteoric rise. Something sharp and painful twisted in Caroline's chest. While she was applying for food stamps, the father of her child was accepting accolades and planning a society wedding. "Ms. Foster?" the intake worker called again, more insistently. Caroline tore her eyes from the screen. "Coming." The worker reviewed her forms with bureaucratic efficiency. "You qualify for TANF, SNAP benefits, and medical assistance for the children," she explained, using acronyms that would soon become familiar parts of Caroline's vocabulary. "We also have a subsidized housing program you might qualify for." The relief of knowing her children would eat warred with the humiliation of needing help. But Caroline swallowed her pride. "Thank you," she said simply. That evening, returning to her apartment after 16 exhausting hours, morning shift at the laundromat, afternoon applying for benefits, evening searching for new cleaning jobs, Caroline faced a new catastrophe. Water poured from beneath her door, soaking the hallway carpet. Inside, a burst pipe had transformed her modest home into a swamp. The crib mattresses were soaked. The second-hand couch she'd purchased at Goodwill sagged with water weight. The few baby clothes she'd so carefully washed and folded floated like bright islands in the murky water. Clutching Olivia to her chest, the baby sleeping in the carrier strapped to her front, Caroline sat on the fire escape in the humid summer night and finally allowed herself to cry. Deep, racking sobs that came from a place of utter exhaustion and despair. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered to the Chicago skyline. "I can't." For a moment, just a moment, she imagined calling Alexander. Surely even he wouldn't want his daughters homeless. But then she remembered his cold eyes, the dismissive way he'd tossed money at her problem. "No," she said aloud, straightening her spine. "This is the last day Alexander Wright will have power over me." The next morning, Caroline left the ruined apartment with both children and the few possessions she could salvage in trash bags. The local YWCA had emergency housing for women with children. It wasn't ideal, a shared room with 3 other families, but it was clean, dry, and safe. That same afternoon, While the babies napped under the watchful eye of another resident, Caroline walked to the community college 6 blocks away. The fall semester was starting in 2 weeks. "I'd like to register for night classes," she told the admissions counselor. "Business administration." The counselor glanced at her skeptically. "That's an intensive program. Do you have childcare arrangements?" "I'll figure it out," Caroline said with more confidence than she felt. That night, in the shared room at the YWCA, Caroline created a meticulous schedule. Laundromat from 7 to 3. Study at the library from 4 to 6 while the children played in the kids section. Classes from 7 to 9 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, with the babies sleeping in a makeshift playpen in the back of the classroom. She'd already negotiated this unusual arrangement with a sympathetic professor. While her roommates slept, Carolyn pored over a library book on small business formation, taking notes in a notebook she'd rescued from the flood. An idea was forming, nebulous still, but growing clearer with each page she read. 3 weeks later, Caroline found herself in a thrift shop, staring at an old Singer sewing machine. $47, almost half of what remained from her first assistance check after paying for the new apartment deposit. "Do you know how to use one of these?" asked the shop owner, noticing her interest. "No," Caroline admitted, "but I can learn." That night, with both girls finally asleep in the new apartment, a subsidized 1-bedroom in a safer neighborhood, Caroline sat at the kitchen table with the sewing machine and scraps of fabric gleaned from the laundromat's lost and found. Her fingers were clumsy at first, the stitches uneven, but with each attempt, they improved. As she worked, a business news program played softly on the second-hand television. Alexander's company had just acquired another firm, expanding its reach into Asian markets. Caroline looked down at her rough hands, then at her sleeping daughters, then at the humble sewing machine that represented her first investment in a different future. "One day you'll look at me and realize the biggest mistake of your life," she promised, kissing Olivia's forehead while typing the first draft of a business plan on a public library computer. The small sewing machine purchased for $47 would be the first equipment of what would become, in a decade, an industry valued in billions. The small sewing machine purchased for $47 would be the first equipment of what would become, in a decade, an industry valued in billions. But for now, as the harsh Chicago winter of 2009 gave way to spring, it represented something more immediate to Caroline: hope. Olivia had just celebrated her first birthday with a modest cupcake Caroline had splurged on, while baby Olivia, now 10 months old, watched with fascinated eyes from her high chair. That night, after tucking both girls into their shared crib, Caroline stared at the receipt from her latest shopping trip. The cost of diapers alone had eaten nearly a quarter of her weekly budget. "This is unsustainable," she whispered, calculator in hand. Every month was a precarious balancing act of bills, food, and necessities for the girls. Something had to change. The next day, while cleaning an executive's office at her new part-time job, Caroline noticed a magazine left open on the desk. "The Environmental Impact of Disposable Diapers," read the headline. The article detailed how the average baby used 6,000 diapers before potty training, creating tons of non-biodegradable waste. Caroline paused, vacuum cleaner humming forgotten in her hand. An idea began to form, nebulous at first, then gaining clarity with each passing second. That evening, after her business administration class, Caroline approached her professor. What would it take to create an environmentally friendly alternative to disposable diapers that's actually affordable for average parents? Professor Martinez smiled. "That sounds like a business plan in the making. Have you considered cloth diapers? They've been around forever." "Yes, but they're expensive up front, inconvenient, and the good ones are priced for wealthy, eco-conscious parents," Caroline replied. "There's a gap in the market." 3 days later, Caroline stood outside a textile factory in the industrial district, Olivia strapped to her chest, the older Olivia clutching her hand. The factory manager, a burly man named Hank, looked at the small family with unconcealed pity. "We discard these remnants daily," he said, pointing to bins of fabric scraps. "Company policy. Can't resell them. Liability issues. But if someone happened to take them from the dumpster after hours..." He raised his eyebrows meaningfully. That night, after the girls were asleep, Caroline sorted through the salvaged fabric under the dim kitchen light. Most pieces were too small for commercial use, but perfect for her purposes. Her fingers, once soft and manicured during her brief relationship with Alexander, were now calloused and nimble from months of laundry work and sewing practice. The first prototypes were disasters, leaky, ill-fitting, with closures that didn't hold. But Caroline was nothing if not persistent. Each night, after classes and homework, she would refine her designs. The kitchen table became a workshop, littered with fabric scraps, pins, and pattern pieces sketched on the backs of recycled papers. "Version 17, Caroline murmured 2 weeks later, holding up a cloth diaper with an innovative pocket design that held a removable, super-absorbent insert made from repurposed materials. "Let's see how you perform." When the diaper successfully contained one of baby Olivia's impressive blowouts, something the expensive store-bought cloth diapers had failed to do, Caroline knew she was onto something. Spring warmed into early summer, and the West Garfield Park Farmers Market opened for the season. For $20, money Caroline could barely spare, she rented a tiny corner table for the day. "Eco Bottoms, affordable, sustainable cloth diapers," read her hand-lettered sign, propped against a display of colorful diapers. She'd stayed up until 3 in the morning completing enough stock for the market, her eyes burning with fatigue. For the first hour, not a single person stopped. Caroline tried not to let disappointment crush her as she watched customers bypass her table for organic produce and artisanal bread. The older Olivia played quietly in a makeshift playpen beside the table, while baby Olivia napped in a carrier. "Are these cloth diapers?" A woman in her 30s paused, examining Caroline's display with interest. "Yes, they're made from reclaimed fabrics, with an innovative pocket design," Caroline explained, demonstrating how the insert worked. "They're washable, reusable, and will last through multiple children." The woman picked one up, rubbing the fabric between her fingers. "How much?" $12 each or 3 for $30, Caroline replied, heart pounding. Commercial cloth diapers sold for $25 or more. "I'll take 3, the woman decided. "My sister just had twins, and she's been looking for eco-friendly options that won't bankrupt her." By the end of the day, Caroline had sold 16 diapers and collected email addresses from customers interested in future products. She counted the money with trembling fingers. $192, more than she'd make in 3 days at the laundromat. That night, using the public computer at the library while the girls slept in their stroller beside her, Caroline created a simple website using a free template and the HTML skills she'd taught herself through online tutorials. Eco Bottoms. Com was basic but functional, featuring photos of her products taken with a borrowed digital camera. 3 days later, she received her first online order from the woman at the farmer's market, whose sister wanted 5 more diapers after trying the initial 3. Then another order came, and another. Each night, Caroline sewed until her fingers cramped, fulfilling orders between classes, work, and caring for the girls. When a small natural products store in Wicker Park ordered 50 diapers for their retail shelves, Caroline faced her first scaling challenge. She couldn't possibly make that many on her own while maintaining her current schedule. The solution came unexpectedly. At the subsidized housing complex where she lived, Caroline often crossed paths with Megan, another single mother who had complimented the cloth diapers Caroline made for her daughters. "You're selling these now?" Megan asked one day, examining a diaper Caroline had just completed. "They're really well made." "I am, but I just got a big order I can't fulfill alone," Caroline admitted. Megan hesitated. "I used to work in a garment factory before my son was born. I could help if you're looking to hire someone." The following Saturday, Caroline's kitchen became an impromptu interview space. Megan arrived promptly, her 4-year-old son in tow. "I can't pay much," Caroline explained honestly, the kitchen table between them covered with fabric, patterns, and a business plan draft for her community college course. "But I can offer flexible hours, and you could work from home once you learn the patterns." "That's worth more than money to a single mom," Megan replied. "Try finding a regular job that lets you stay home when your kid has a fever." By the end of June, Eco Bottoms had 2 employees, Caroline and Megan, and had fulfilled its first substantial wholesale order. The operation had outgrown Caroline's kitchen table, with production now spread between both women's apartments. Summer brought a new milestone: Caroline's graduation from her first year of business administration courses. Standing in the community college auditorium in a borrowed gown, Caroline accepted her certificate with distinction, the highest grades in her cohort. 2-year-old Olivia clapped enthusiastically from the audience where she sat with Megan, while baby Olivia, now 14 months old, babbled happily. "Special recognition goes to Caroline Foster," announced the department chair, who maintained a perfect GPA while raising 2 children and starting a business. "This exemplifies the determination we hope to instill in all our students." As applause filled the auditorium, Caroline thought fleetingly of Alexander. What would he think of her now? The boring waitress he'd dismissed had just been honored for academic excellence while launching a business. The thought gave her a brief, fierce satisfaction. Reality, however, quickly reasserted itself. Despite growing sales, Eco Bottoms needed capital to expand. Caroline's careful financial records showed promising growth, but banks were reluctant to lend to a single mother with limited credit history and a business run from her kitchen. "You need to demonstrate scalability," advised her business professor after reviewing her loan application, "and you need collateral, which you don't have." Caroline spent a week revising her business plan, incorporating everything she'd learned in her courses. She researched small business grants, micro-lending programs, and angel investors, sending applications to any opportunity that didn't require matching funds she didn't have. On a sweltering August afternoon, Caroline sat across from Mr. Winters, a loan officer at Chicago Community Bank, her meticulous business plan and sales projections spread between them. She'd worn her only professional outfit, a navy blue skirt and white blouse purchased from a thrift store and carefully tailored to fit her slim frame. "Your numbers are impressive for a startup," Mr. Winters admitted, reviewing her documentation. "But without collateral or a longer business history, I can only approve a fraction of what you're asking for." "How much?" Caroline asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. $7,000, at 11% interest. It was less than a third of what she needed for proper equipment and a small production space, but it was something. "I'll take it," Caroline said firmly. With the loan secured, Caroline found a small basement space in a commercial building on the west side. The rent was affordable because the space had been vacant for years. The windows were small, the lighting poor, and water damage stained one wall, but it was infinitely better than her kitchen table. "Our first real workspace," Caroline told the girls as they explored the empty room. She'd brought a small container of sage to burn, a ritual her grandmother had taught her to clear negative energy from a new space. "This is the beginning of something big." With the remainder of the loan, Caroline purchased 3 second-hand industrial sewing machines, proper cutting tables, and enough fabric to launch a new product line, not just diapers, but reusable baby wipes, changing pads, and wet bags for storing soiled items. As September approached, Caroline enrolled in her second year of business courses, arranged childcare through a subsidized program, and officially incorporated her business. Sitting at the new desk in their small production space, she signed the papers that transformed Eco Bottoms into Foster Innovation, LLC. That evening, exhausted but satisfied, Carolyn turned on the small television in their apartment while preparing dinner. A breaking news banner caught her attention. Wright Investments CEO announces engagement. The camera cut to Alexander Wright, arm in arm with Victoria Pembroke, a willowy blonde whose family owned one of Chicago's oldest banking institutions. "Victoria represents everything I value," Alexander told the reporter, his arm possessively around his fiancée's waist. "Class, education, and appropriate family connections." Caroline froze, wooden spoon halfway to her lips, as the camera panned to show the elaborate engagement party. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and Chicago's elite mingling in designer evening wear, a world away from her basement workshop with its second-hand equipment. "Mama, hungry," called little Olivia from her play area, breaking the spell. Caroline turned off the television with a decisive click. Alexander's world of inherited wealth and hollow values no longer had the power to hurt her. She was building something real, something meaningful. Not just a business, but a legacy for her daughters. The next morning, as Caroline signed the official registration documents for Foster Innovation, LLC, she couldn't know that in 7 years, she would be developing patents that would revolutionize 3 industries, while Alexander's perfect marriage would crumble under the weight of financial scandals. The next morning, as Caroline signed the official registration documents for Foster Innovation, LLC, she couldn't know that in 7 years, she would be developing patents that would revolutionize 3 industries, while Alexander's perfect marriage would crumble under the weight of financial scandals. For now, her focus remained on survival and steady growth, one careful step at a time. Spring of 2011 arrived with unexpected momentum. Foster Innovation had weathered its first full year of operation, with sales doubling each quarter. The basement workspace, once cavernous for 2 sewing machines, now felt cramped with 5 employees, all single mothers who worked flexible hours while their children played in the designated kids' corner Caroline had set up. One rainy April morning, Caroline arrived at work to find a large envelope waiting. Inside was the latest issue of Natural Parenting magazine, and there, in the product review section, was a glowing write-up of EcoBottom's diapers. Revolutionary design at half the price of competitors, making eco-friendly options accessible to average families. "We did it," Caroline whispered, showing the magazine to Megan, who'd become her unofficial second-in-command. "Our first national press." By afternoon, their simple website had crashed from traffic, and the voicemail was full of wholesale inquiries. Caroline's elation quickly transformed into panic. "We can't fulfill these orders with our current setup," she admitted during an emergency meeting with her small team. The following week brought another surprise. While restocking EcoBottoms at Green Sprout, a natural baby store in Wicker Park, Caroline noticed a display of suspiciously familiar diapers. "Nature Bum Eco Diapers," the packaging read. Caroline picked one up, her stomach tightening. The design was nearly identical to her patent-pending pocket system, but made with cheaper materials and inferior stitching. "These just came in," the store owner explained, noticing Caroline's interest. "From Bambino Brands. They're offering wholesale prices that undercut yours by 30%. Bambino Brands, a subsidiary of Comfort Corporation, one of the largest baby product manufacturers in the country." Caroline's hands trembled slightly as she set the knockoff diaper down. "I need to speak with a lawyer," she told Megan that afternoon. "They've copied our design." The consultation with a patent attorney was disheartening. "You've filed for a patent, which is good," explained Mr. Gonzalez, reviewing her paperwork. "But litigation against a company like Comfort would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, more than your entire business is worth right now." Caroline walked home in a daze, rain soaking through her thin jacket. 3 years of struggle, of late nights perfecting designs, of sacrificing everything to build something meaningful, all of it threatened by a corporation that could crush her without even noticing. That evening, after tucking the girls into bed, Caroline sat at her small kitchen table surrounded by fabric samples, competitor products, and her own designs. If she couldn't fight Comfort Corporation in court, she would have to out-innovate them. "Think, Caroline," she murmured, rubbing her temples. "What do they can't easily replicate?" 4-year-old Olivia padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, clutching a plant from the community garden they tended on weekends. "Mommy, my sticky plant is dying," she announced, holding up the wilted specimen. Caroline glanced at the plant, lamb's ear with its soft, velvety leaves that naturally repelled water. She'd chosen it for the garden because the girls loved stroking its fuzzy texture. "That's because you picked it, sweetheart," Caroline explained, taking the plant. As her fingers touched the unique texture, something clicked. "Wait a minute." For the next 3 weeks, Caroline experimented relentlessly. The community garden became her research lab as she collected samples of natural fibers with water-resistant properties. The kitchen became a testing facility, with various combinations of sustainable materials subjected to absorption tests, washability trials, and durability assessments. "What exactly are you making?" asked Megan one morning, watching Caroline layer an unusual combination of hemp, modified lamb's ear fibers, and reclaimed cotton. "The future," Caroline replied, not looking up from her work. "Something they can't copy because they're too invested in petroleum-based materials to pivot quickly." By early June, Caroline had developed a prototype fabric unlike anything on the market, completely biodegradable, extraordinarily absorbent, naturally antimicrobial, and made from sustainable sources. It was perfect not just for diapers, but potentially for countless other applications. The challenge now was scaling production. Her small loan had been exhausted, and banks remained reluctant to extend significant credit to her fledgling operation despite its growing sales. Opportunity arrived unexpectedly on a sweltering July afternoon. A woman in her early 60s walked into the basement workspace without appointment, glancing around with shrewd assessment. Her silver hair was cut in an elegant bob, and her simple linen dress likely cost more than all the furniture in Caroline's apartment. "I'm looking for Caroline Foster," she announced to Megan, who was manning the front desk. Caroline emerged from the production area, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Caroline. Eleanor Matthews," the woman introduced herself. "I purchased your diapers for my granddaughter at Green Sprout last month. I'd like to speak with you privately." In the tiny office partitioned off from the main workspace, Eleanor got straight to the point. "These products are revolutionary, yet you're operating out of a basement with second-hand equipment. Why?" Caroline blinked, caught off guard by the directness. "Capital constraints. We're growing, but you're severely undercapitalized and vulnerable to being copied or crushed by established players," Eleanor interrupted. "I've already seen the Bambino knockoffs." "How do you know all this?" Caroline asked cautiously. Eleanor's lips curved into a small smile. "I founded Matthews Sustainable Textiles 30 years ago, sold it to Global Fibers 5 years ago. Now I invest in women-led businesses with disruptive potential." She leaned forward. "Why are you operating in a basement when you have the best textile innovation I've seen in years?" For the next hour, Eleanor grilled Caroline about her business model, production processes, and vision for the future. Caroline answered with growing confidence, showing Eleanor her newest material development and explaining its potential applications beyond baby products. "I want to invest," Eleanor finally said. $500,000 for a 20% stake, plus my expertise, connections, and mentorship." Caroline's breath caught. The amount was more than she dared hope for. "I need to maintain control of the company," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "And I want guarantees about our hiring practices. We employ primarily single mothers and provide flexible schedules, childcare assistance, and education opportunities." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with approval. "I'd expect nothing less. Draw up your terms, but do it quickly. You need to patent this new material before Comfort gets wind of it." By September, Foster Innovation had moved into a renovated warehouse space in a developing neighborhood. Proper manufacturing equipment replaced the second-hand machines. A dedicated research lab occupied one corner, while a bright, cheerful childcare room allowed employees to bring their children to work when necessary. "This isn't just a job," Caroline told the new employees during orientation. We're building a new model of what a workplace can be, one that recognizes that workers are whole people with families and responsibilities. With Eleanor's guidance, Caroline filed comprehensive patents on her new biodegradable material. Product lines expanded beyond baby items to include sustainable menstrual products, eco-friendly incontinence solutions, and biodegradable medical coverings, all using variations of her innovative textile. On a crisp October morning, Caroline stood before a classroom of kindergartners for Career Day. 5-year-old Olivia beamed with pride as her mother explained how she made special fabric that helps keep our planet clean. "My mommy's a business owner," Olivia announced to her classmates, "and a scientist and an inventor." Later that day, Caroline was called to meet with Olivia's teacher. Expecting the usual updates on her daughter's progress, she was surprised by the teacher's serious expression. "Mrs. Foster," Caroline corrected gently. "Ms. Foster, have you ever had Olivia's cognitive abilities formally assessed? She's reading at a 4th grade level and her mathematical reasoning is extraordinary for a child her age." Caroline listened with growing amazement as the teacher detailed Olivia's exceptional abilities. "She may be what we call profoundly gifted. I'd recommend testing for placement in our advanced program, possibly even consideration for specialized schools for gifted children." That evening, watching Olivia help her younger sister with a picture book, Caroline felt a surge of fierce pride. Despite everything, the poverty, the struggle, the absence of their father, her daughters were thriving. Olivia, especially, was showing talents that even Caroline hadn't fully recognized. "Your daughter has the highest test scores we've seen in a student this young," the school psychologist confirmed 2 weeks later. "We're recommending immediate placement in our program for exceptionally gifted children." December brought Foster Innovation's first industry recognition. At the Chicago Sustainable Business Awards, Caroline accepted the Innovation in Eco-Materials Prize, a small crystal trophy that she displayed prominently in the company's front office. "Foster Innovation represents the future of sustainable manufacturing," read the citation, "creating revolutionary materials while building a company culture that prioritizes families and work-life balance." Standing at the podium in a simple but elegant dress, her first non-thrift store purchase in years, Caroline scanned the audience of business leaders and entrepreneurs. For a fleeting moment, she imagined Alexander among them, witnessing what the boring waitress had accomplished. "This award belongs to every member of our team," she said instead, focusing on the present. "Especially the working mothers who bring both their professional talents and their life wisdom to our company every day." A small write-up about the award appeared in the Chicago Business Journal the following week. "The Green Revolution's Silent Pioneer: How Foster Innovation is Changing Manufacturing." It wasn't Forbes or Fortune, but seeing her company name in print filled Caroline with quiet satisfaction. That night, tucking the girls into bed in their new apartment, still modest but in a safer neighborhood with better schools, Caroline reflected on how far they'd come in just 3 years. "Tell us the story about the sewing machine again," requested 3-year-old Olivia, while her sister organized books on her small shelf by subject matter and reading level. "Once upon a time," Caroline began, "there was a mommy who had 2 beautiful daughters and $47 to her name. She bought a magic sewing machine that looked ordinary to everyone else, but it could create wonderful things." As the girls drifted off to sleep, Caroline returned to the kitchen table, where she was designing a new line of sustainable nursing pads based on her patented material. The kitchen no longer doubled as a factory, but it remained her favorite place to sketch new ideas while her daughters slept nearby. While Caroline carefully drew the new design, she didn't know that in just 5 years, she would be refusing an offer of $100 million from the same corporation that had tried to copy her product. While Caroline carefully drew the new design, she didn't know that in just 5 years, she would be refusing an offer of $100 million from the same corporation that had tried to copy her product. But as the summer of 2014 bloomed across Chicago, 7 years after Alexander's cruel dismissal, Foster innovation had already transformed beyond even Caroline's ambitious dreams. The company headquarters now occupied an entire floor of a renovated industrial building in West Loop. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the open-concept workspace with natural light, illuminating production samples and design boards featuring the company's expanding product lines. 85 employees, predominantly women, many of whom had started as single mothers with limited options, now operated specialized equipment, managed departments, or developed new applications for Caroline's revolutionary biodegradable textile. "The Q2 numbers just came in," announced Megan, now Chief Operations Officer, striding into Caroline's glass-walled office with a tablet in hand. "We've exceeded projections by 22%. The hospital supply line is performing even better than expected." Caroline looked up from the prototype she was examining, a new sustainable medical drape that could revolutionize surgical waste management. At 32, she still maintained the determined focus that had propelled her from desperate single mother to innovative CEO, though her once perpetual exhaustion had been replaced by a poised confidence. "That's the third consecutive quarter above projections," Caroline noted, a small smile playing at her lips. "How's the production capacity holding for the increased demand?" "We'll need to consider expansion soon," Megan replied. "Eleanor's already looking at potential manufacturing partners with compatible values." The mention of Eleanor Matthews, now board chairwoman and Caroline's trusted mentor, brought a warm sense of gratitude. The older woman's investment and guidance had been transformative, but she'd always respected Caroline's vision for a company that prioritized both innovation and humanity. Later that afternoon, Caroline stood in the company's material science lab, watching as technicians tested a new variation of her patented fabric. What had begun as a desperate attempt to outmaneuver copycats had evolved into a technological breakthrough, a fully biodegradable, high-performance textile that could be manipulated for countless applications, from medical supplies to sustainable packaging. "The tensile strength is remarkable," noted Dr. Patel, the materials scientist Caroline had hired from MIT the previous year, "and it breaks down completely in compost conditions within 12 weeks, leaving zero toxic residue." "That's what the world needs to see," Caroline replied, already envisioning the marketing possibilities. "Products don't have to choose between performance and sustainability." As Caroline exited the lab, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, Olivia's school meeting. Glancing at her watch, a modest but elegant timepiece that had replaced her once battered drugstore model, she realized she had just enough time to make it. Kensington Academy was housed in a stately brick building in Lincoln Park, its ivy-covered walls and manicured grounds reflecting its status as Chicago's premier school for gifted children. Caroline still experienced a momentary sense of displacement whenever she walked through its ornate entrance, a visceral reminder of how far they had come from the subsidized housing complex where Olivia had started kindergarten. "Ms. Foster, thank you for coming," greeted Dr. Reynolds, the Academy's director, rising from behind an imposing desk. "We wanted to discuss Olivia's exceptional progress and some opportunities we believe would benefit her." Seated beside Caroline, 7-year-old Olivia looked both serious and excited, her posture impeccable in the Academy's navy uniform. The resemblance to Alexander was increasingly apparent in her aristocratic profile and confident bearing, though her compassionate eyes and quiet determination were all Caroline. "Olivia has tested at the high school level in mathematics and sciences," Dr. Reynolds explained, sliding a folder of assessment results across the desk. "Quite frankly, she's the most academically gifted student we've encountered in my 15 years at Kensington." Pride surged through Caroline as she reviewed the test scores. Her daughter, the child Alexander had dismissed as a problem to be solved with $5,000, was being recognized as an extraordinary talent. "We'd like to accelerate her mathematics curriculum immediately and introduce her to university-level concepts by next year," Dr. Reynolds continued. "With your permission, of course." "What do you think, Olivia?" Caroline asked, turning to her daughter. She had always been careful to involve the girls in decisions about their education, teaching them agency from an early age. I'd like that, Olivia replied thoughtfully. The current math is too easy, and I finish early every day. Driving home, Caroline glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, watching as Olivia read a scientific journal meant for readers 3 times her age. In the quiet moments like these, Caroline sometimes wondered if Alexander had any idea what he'd thrown away, not just Caroline herself, but the chance to know this remarkable child. Her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system, interrupting her thoughts. "Caroline, it's Eleanor. Have you seen the business news today?" "No. I've been in meetings all morning and just came from Olivia's school. What's happening?" "Wright Investments is under investigation for misleading environmental claims," Eleanor said, an undercurrent of satisfaction in her voice. "They've been promoting a green investment portfolio while heavily funding coal mining operations and petrochemical companies. Classic greenwashing." Caroline's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. Alexander's company had grown tremendously over the years, often through aggressive tactics and ethical shortcuts that stood in stark contrast to Foster Innovation's transparent practices. "The financial press is calling it a significant blow to Wright's credibility in the sustainable investment space," Eleanor continued. "Their stock dropped 11% this morning." That evening, as Caroline prepared dinner in their comfortable Lincoln Park apartment, a far cry from the tiny, flooded unit where she'd once cradled her babies in despair, the television played a financial news update in the background. The camera cut to Alexander Wright leaving a downtown building, surrounded by reporters shouting questions about the greenwashing allegations. 7 years had changed him too, Carolyn noted with detached curiosity. His face had filled out, a certain softness around his jaw suggesting comfort and excess. The arrogant confidence remained, but now seemed brittle around the edges as he brushed past questions with rehearsed non-answers. Behind him walked Victoria Wright, his society wife, her expression a careful mask as cameras flashed. The tabloids had been speculating about trouble in their marriage for months, ever since Victoria had been photographed in Aspen with a prominent film director, while Alexander was closing deals in Tokyo. "Mom, is that man in trouble?" asked Olivia, looking up from her advanced physics workbook at the kitchen table. "Yes," Caroline replied simply. "His company wasn't honest about how they were using people's money." "That's wrong," Olivia stated with the clear moral certainty of childhood. "You always say honesty is our most important company value." Caroline smiled, turning away from the screen to focus on her daughter. "And that's why people trust Foster Innovation." September brought a milestone that Caroline had once thought impossible. Foster Innovation was featured in a prominent spread in National Business magazine, highlighting the company's innovative materials and progressive workplace policies. The article, titled "The Revolution in Green Manufacturing," included a professional photograph of Caroline in the company's research lab, looking confidently into the camera in a simple but elegant blazer, the Foster Innovation logo visible on the wall behind her. The same week, Caroline received an invitation that made her pause. The Chicago Business Leaders Forum, an exclusive gathering of the city's most influential executives. Alexander Wright had been a fixture at these events for years. The possibility of encountering him, now as a peer rather than a dismissed inconvenience, sent an unexpected ripple of emotion through her. "You should absolutely attend," Eleanor advised during their weekly mentor meeting. "Foster Innovation deserves that seat at the table, and so do you." Caroline's calendar alert chimed again. Olivia's science exhibition at Kensington's annual showcase. Leaving work early, she arrived to find her daughter confidently explaining molecular structures to impressed parents and teachers, her project on biodegradable polymers winning first prize in the upper school division, despite Olivia being years younger than her competitors. "Dr. Hartwell from Northwestern University asked if I'd like to visit his laboratory," Olivia reported excitedly on the drive home. "He's doing research on sustainable materials too." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Caroline replied, a thought suddenly occurring to her. "Would you like to come to the lab at Foster tomorrow? You could show Dr. Patel your project." The next day, Watching Olivia engage with professional scientists as an intellectual equal, Caroline felt a surge of bittersweet pride. Her daughter was flourishing despite, perhaps even because of, Alexander's absence. What might have been a tragedy had instead forced Caroline to build something extraordinary on her own terms. That evening, as Caroline reviewed applications for the company's education scholarship program for children of employees, her phone lit up with a news alert. Wright Investments CEO Alexander Wright and wife announced separation amid company scandal. The accompanying photo showed Alexander leaving a Manhattan restaurant alone, looking haggard and defensive as photographers swarmed. The article mentioned irreconcilable differences and tremendous stress from ongoing investigations into the company's investment practices. Caroline closed the notification without reading further. Alexander's personal problems were no longer of interest to her. Her focus remained on growing Foster innovation and raising her daughters to be the kind of people who would never discard others as insignificant. October brought an unexpected offer. Comfort Corporation, the same company whose subsidiary had attempted to copy Caroline's original designs, approached with an acquisition proposal, $100 million for Foster innovation. They're desperate to green their image after their own sustainability claims came under scrutiny, Eleanor observed during the emergency board meeting. Buying Foster would give them instant credibility. Caroline stood at the conference room window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. $100 million. The amount was staggering, enough to secure her daughter's futures for generations, enough to never worry about money again. "What are you thinking?" Megan asked quietly. Caroline turned back to the board, her decision already made. "Foster Innovation isn't for sale," she stated firmly, "not at any price." "The offer is substantially above market value," noted their financial advisor. "Because what we've built is worth more than their valuation metrics can capture," Caroline replied. "Our patents, our workplace model, our reputation for integrity, these aren't just assets to be acquired and potentially dismantled." As winter approached, Foster Innovation launched its first sustainable clothing line, featuring everyday basics made entirely from their patented biodegradable materials, modeled by women of diverse ages, sizes, and backgrounds. In the company's bright design studio, Caroline watched as 7-year-old Olivia carefully sketched a modification to a fabric pattern, her small brow furrowed in concentration. "I think this might make it even stronger, Mom," she explained, showing Caroline her drawing. "If we change the molecular structure here, it could improve water resistance without affecting biodegradability." Caroline examined the surprisingly sophisticated design, recognizing elements of the molecular formulas they'd been discussing in the lab just days earlier. Her daughter had not only understood the complex science but had intuitively identified a potential improvement. "This is brilliant, Olivia," Caroline said, genuine amazement in her voice. "Let's show this to Dr. Patel tomorrow." Later that evening, Caroline stood at the window of her office watching the lights of Chicago flicker on as dusk settled. 7 years ago, she had been a devastated waitress, pregnant and abandoned, staring at a flooded apartment with no hope in sight. Now she commanded a growing enterprise that was changing its industry's approach to sustainability. Somewhere in that skyline, Alexander Wright was presumably dealing with the dual crises of his failing marriage and company investigations. Caroline felt no satisfaction in his troubles, only a profound gratitude for the path that had led her here, unexpected and difficult though it had been. As the Forbes that once celebrated Alexander Wright as the prodigy of Wall Street now prepared a cover story about Caroline Foster, neither of them knew that the Tech Green Summit in 3 months would be the stage for the business world's most explosive confrontation of the year. As the Forbes that once celebrated Alexander Wright as the prodigy of Wall Street now prepared a cover story about Caroline Foster, neither of them knew that the Tech Green Summit in 3 months would be the stage for the business world's most explosive confrontation of the year. For now, Caroline remained focused on the more immediate challenges of growing her company and raising her daughters. The winter of 2017 marked 10 years since Alexander had coldly dismissed Caroline from his life. Foster Innovation had blossomed into a nationally recognized leader in sustainable materials with over 200 employees and products stocked in major retail chains across the country. The small basement operation had transformed into a powerhouse that industry veterans now watched with respect and competitors eyed with concern. Caroline's morning routine had evolved with her circumstances. Gone were the pre-dawn struggles to prepare 2 babies for daycare before rushing to the laundromat. Now, at 36, she moved with purposeful efficiency through her Lincoln Park townhouse, reviewing overnight emails from international partners while Olivia, now 10, prepared her own breakfast with independent precision. "Mom, don't forget I have robotics club after school today," Olivia reminded, carefully arranging her advanced calculus textbooks in her backpack. "Dr. Harrington said we might finish the solar-powered filtration prototype." "I remember," Caroline replied, marveling at her daughter's seamless transition between childhood activities and university-level scientific projects. "I'll pick you up at 5:30. The sleek Tesla, Caroline's one significant personal indulgence, hummed quietly as she navigated morning traffic toward Foster Innovation headquarters. The car's screen displayed an incoming call from Megan. "Have you seen the email about the Chicago Sustainability Summit?" Megan asked without preamble. "They want you on the main panel discussing the future of ethical manufacturing." Caroline merged onto Lake Shore Drive, the winter sun glinting off Lake Michigan to her right. "Send them a tentative yes. I'll need to check Olivia's schedule first." "Already handled. There's something else you should know." Megan paused. "Alexander Wright is also confirmed as a panelist." Caroline's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. In 10 years, she had successfully avoided any direct interaction with Alexander, though Chicago's business circles were small enough that their paths had occasionally crossed at a distance. "Interesting timing," Caroline replied, her voice neutral. His company just announced their new environmental impact initiative after 2 years of negative press about their investment practices. At Foster Innovation headquarters, Caroline moved through the morning with practiced efficiency: a product development meeting, a conference call with European distributors, a review of the quarterly projections. Yet beneath her composed exterior, her mind periodically returned to the upcoming panel. After a decade, she would finally face Alexander as an equal. No, as a superior in their field. The day of the Chicago Sustainability Summit arrived with unseasonable warmth for early March. Caroline chose her outfit with deliberate care. A tailored charcoal suit that conveyed authority without ostentation, paired with a shell in Foster Innovation's signature green. The only jewelry she wore was a delicate necklace Olivia had given her for Christmas, containing a tiny vial of their revolutionary biodegradable fiber. Backstage at the Grand Sheraton, Caroline reviewed her presentation notes while other speakers milled about. The summit had attracted sustainability leaders from across the country, making it a significant platform for Foster Innovation's latest innovations. Her focused concentration broke only when a familiar voice carried across the green room. "Merely a transitional strategy while we develop more comprehensive approaches." Alexander Wright stood near the refreshment table, holding court with 2 admiring junior executives. At 42, he remained handsome in the conventional way that opened doors in corporate America, though the past decade had added a certain heaviness to his once lean frame. The bespoke suit couldn't quite disguise the beginnings of a paunch, and faint lines of stress had etched themselves around his eyes. Caroline maintained her position, continuing to review her notes while acutely aware of his presence. It was Alexander who spotted her first, his sentence trailing off mid-word as recognition dawned. The double-take was subtle but unmistakable, a flicker of confusion followed by widening eyes and a momentary loss of composure. "Caroline?" The surprise in his voice was genuine. "Caroline Foster?" She looked up with practiced professional poise, as though noticing him for the first time. "Alexander." Her acknowledgement was polite but cool, offering nothing beyond the minimum professional courtesy. He crossed the room with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding attention, though Caroline noted a slight hesitation as he approached, the uncertainty of a man recalibrating his understanding of someone he had once dismissed. "I had no idea you would be on the panel," he said, his eyes taking in her transformation, the confident posture, the quality of her attire, the clear authority she now projected. "You look different." 10 years will do that," Caroline replied, her smile professionally pleasant but not reaching her eyes. Alexander shifted, clearly searching for familiar footing. "I've heard impressive things about Foster Innovation. Quite a journey from—" He paused, perhaps realizing the dangerous territory he was entering. "From waiting tables at the Magnolia Diner?" Caroline completed his thought, her voice level. "Yes, it has been." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face before he recovered, slipping into his public persona. "The business world loves an entrepreneurial success story. We should catch up sometime. Right Investments has been developing a sustainability portfolio that might align with your company's goals." "Our investment partnerships are handled through our board," Caroline replied, effectively shutting down his implied suggestion of personal connection. "Eleanor Matthews oversees those relationships." "Eleanor Matthews? The textile pioneer?" Alexander's surprise was evident. "She's notoriously selective about her involvements." "Yes, she is," Caroline agreed, the implication clear. Their conversation was interrupted by the summit coordinator announcing 5 minutes until the panel began. Caroline gathered her materials with unhurried precision, aware of Alexander's continued gaze. "Good luck with your presentation," he offered, the comment hovering awkwardly between professional courtesy and personal history. "Thank you. Sustainability isn't just a presentation topic for Foster Innovation. It's our foundation." The gentle rebuke was subtle but unmistakable. On stage, seated at opposite ends of the panel table, Caroline observed Alexander in his natural habitat. He spoke with the practiced confidence of someone who had inherited authority rather than earned it, emphasizing Right Investments' new commitment to responsible capitalism and forward-looking environmental stewardship. When her turn came, Caroline didn't directly challenge his assertions. Instead, she presented Foster Innovation's measurable achievements. While others discuss future commitments, we've reduced manufacturing waste by 78% over 6 years, created 312 living wage jobs primarily for vulnerable populations, and developed 18 patents for fully biodegradable materials now used in medical facilities worldwide. The moderator, sensing the contrasting approaches, leaned into the tension. "We seem to have two fundamentally different philosophies represented here. Mr. Wright advocates for gradual integration of sustainability into existing corporate structures, while Ms. Foster suggests a ground-up reimagining of how businesses operate." Alexander's response was immediate. "Companies with established market positions and shareholder responsibilities must balance multiple priorities. Small to mid-sized enterprises like Foster have the luxury of prioritizing ideals over quarterly results." The subtle dismissal, relegating Foster Innovation to a different category of business, was a clear attempt to re-establish hierarchy. Caroline felt a familiar flame ignite within her, the same determination that had carried her through years of struggle. Foster Innovation's profit margins exceeded industry averages by 40% last quarter, she countered, her voice calm but carrying easily across the rapt audience. "Our employee retention rate is 93% in an industry that averages 67%. Sustainable practices aren't a luxury, they're a competitive advantage." From her seat in the front row, Olivia watched the exchange with keen interest, taking detailed notes in her characteristic, precise handwriting. Caroline caught her daughter's eye briefly, drawing strength from her presence. What Caroline couldn't see was Alexander's gaze drifting to Olivia during a fellow panelist's remarks. The momentary furrowing of his brow suggested puzzlement, something about the poised young girl triggering a nebulous recognition. His attention quickly returned to the panel, the fleeting observation filed away. After the session concluded to enthusiastic applause, Caroline was immediately surrounded by potential partners and journalists. Alexander hovered at the periphery of the group, clearly weighing whether to approach again. When he finally maneuvered closer, his expression had shifted to one of calculated charm. "We should discuss potential synergies between our organizations," he suggested, lowering his voice to create artificial intimacy. "Perhaps over dinner? For old time's sake." Before Caroline could respond, Olivia appeared at her side. "Mom, your points about circular manufacturing processes were brilliant. Your rebuttal completely dismantled his growth-at-any-cost argument." Alexander's expression froze, his attention now fully on the child whose existence he had once tried to erase with cash. Though Olivia addressed her mother, the resemblance between father and daughter was striking. The same determined jaw, the aristocratic nose, the natural authority in their bearing. "This is my daughter, Olivia," Caroline said simply, watching realization dawn in Alexander's eyes. "Your daughter," he repeated, calculation and shock warring across his features. "Olivia, this is Mr. Wright, CEO of Wright Investments. We were just discussing different approaches to corporate sustainability." Olivia extended her hand with the composure of someone far beyond her 10 years. "Your company's public sustainability goals seem aspirational rather than operational. Have you considered establishing measurable benchmarks with transparent reporting mechanisms?" Alexander accepted the handshake automatically, visibly struggling to process both the child's existence and her precocious challenge. "We have several initiatives under development." "Development isn't implementation," Olivia replied with the clear-eyed precision that made her science teachers simultaneously delighted and intimidated. "Statistics show that 87% of corporate sustainability pledges without defined metrics fail to materialize into meaningful change." Caroline suppressed a smile at Alexander's momentary speechlessness. "We should get going, Olivia. We have dinner plans." As they gathered their belongings, Alexander recovered enough to make one last attempt. "Caroline, I think we need to discuss some old, personal matters. Perhaps we could—" "We don't have anything to discuss beyond potential professional interactions, Mr. Wright," Caroline interrupted firmly. "Any communication regarding Foster Innovation can go through our corporate channels." Walking away with Olivia beside her, Caroline felt Alexander's gaze follow them across the lobby. The weight of unspoken questions hung in the air, but for the first time in their unbalanced history, Caroline held all the power. "He seemed confused by my statistics," Olivia observed as they reached the exit. "Was my analysis incorrect?" "Your analysis was perfect," Caroline assured her, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Some people just aren't accustomed to being challenged by the truth." While Alexander observed Caroline leaving with the young girl who had his same face shape and determination in her gaze, a disturbing thought began to form. Could it be possible that the waitress he'd paid to solve the problem had actually given birth to his daughter? While Alexander observed Caroline leaving with the young girl who had his same face shape and determination in her gaze, a disturbing thought began to form. Could it be possible that the waitress he'd paid to solve the problem had actually given birth to his daughter? The question haunted him during the cab ride back to Wright Investments headquarters. The calculation was simple enough. The girl appeared to be around 10 years old, which aligned perfectly with that uncomfortable episode he'd worked so hard to forget. And that face, those unmistakable Wright features that had graced magazine covers and corporate annual reports for generations. Spring of 2019 arrived in Chicago with unusually gentle warmth, much like the growing acclaim surrounding Foster Innovation. 12 years had passed since Alexander had dismissed Caroline from his office and his life. The company she had built from desperation now occupied a gleaming 10-story building in the West Loop, its rooftop garden and solar array visible from miles away, a physical manifestation of the sustainable values at its core. Caroline reviewed the final edits on her feature for National Business Today, the most prestigious business publication in the country. The article, 50 Women Changing American Business, positioned her alongside tech pioneers and financial powerhouses, a placement that would have seemed hallucinatory during those dark days of struggling to feed her daughters. "The photographer will be here at 11, Megan reminded her, now Executive Vice President of Operations. "The stylist wants to know if you prefer the emerald suit or the navy." "The emerald," Caroline decided. "It represents our brand better." The Foster Innovation boardroom buzzed with activity as Caroline's team prepared for the quarterly strategy meeting. The walls displayed growth charts with consistently upward trajectories and framed patent certificates, 23 at last count, for materials that had revolutionized everything from medical supplies to construction materials. Eleanor Matthews, now 70, took her customary seat at Caroline's right hand. Though officially semi-retired, her strategic insight remained invaluable. "The projections for the Asia expansion look solid," she noted, reviewing the presentation slides. "Singapore is particularly enthusiastic about the biodegradable building insulation." Caroline nodded, momentarily distracted by a news alert on her tablet. "Right investments under investigation for greenwashing claims," the headline proclaimed. The article detailed allegations that Alexander's company had created a sustainable investment portfolio that secretly funneled money into coal mining operations and plastic manufacturing while marketing itself as environmentally responsible. "Couldn't happen to a more deserving company," Eleanor remarked, noticing Caroline's attention. "Their entire sustainability initiative has been smoke and mirrors from the beginning." The professional photo shoot later that morning was efficient and productive. Caroline had long since grown comfortable in front of cameras, her natural poise enhanced by genuine confidence in what she and her team had built. The photographer, a veteran of celebrity and CEO portraits, commented on her authentic presence. High praise in an industry where manufactured images were the norm. "You don't pose like most executives," he observed while reviewing the digital shots. "There's something refreshingly real here." Caroline smiled. "I spent too many years pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Now that things actually are good, there's no need for pretense." That evening, Caroline drove to Whitfield Academy, where 12-year-old Olivia was presenting her science project at the annual Innovation Fair. The school's prestigious campus, with its ivy-covered brick buildings and manicured lawns, had initially intimidated Caroline when Olivia had received her scholarship 3 years earlier. Now she navigated its hallways with the ease of a parent whose child consistently broke academic records. In the main exhibition hall, Olivia stood confidently beside her display, "Biodegradable Electronics, Reducing E-Waste Through Innovative Materials." The complexity of the project would have been impressive for a graduate student, let alone a 12-year-old. Several university representatives hovered nearby, clearly intrigued. "Mom!" Olivia's face lit up when she spotted Caroline. "Professor Winters from Northwestern asked if I'd be interested in summer lab access for further development of my prototype." Pride surged through Caroline as she hugged her daughter. "That's incredible, sweetheart." As they toured the other exhibits, Caroline found herself wondering, not for the first time, if Alexander had any inkling of what he had discarded along with the inconvenient waitress. Did he ever think about the child he'd tried to erase with $5,000? Would he recognize his own brilliant mind in Olivia's extraordinary capabilities? The thought had barely formed when Olivia asked the question she'd managed to avoid for years. "Mom, everyone else has fathers who come to these events," she said quietly as they walked to the car. "You never talk about mine. Is he dead?" Caroline had prepared for this moment, knowing it would eventually arrive. Taking a deep breath, she chose her words carefully. "No, he's not dead. He made a choice before you were born that he didn't want to be part of our lives. Did you tell him about me?" Olivia's analytical mind sought the logical sequence. "Yes," Caroline answered honestly. "He decided he wasn't ready to be a father and didn't want the responsibility. Olivia processed this with remarkable composure. "His loss," she finally said with a shrug that didn't quite hide her hurt. "We're pretty amazing together." Caroline pulled her daughter close. "The most amazing, and we've done just fine, haven't we?" "Better than fine," Olivia agreed, her resilience shining through. "We're exceptional." Later that night, after Olivia had gone to bed, Caroline found herself standing at the window of their townhouse looking out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Alexander Wright was likely dealing with the fallout from the greenwashing scandal. According to Business News, Wright Investments stock had dropped 15% since the investigation announcement. The television in her study, which she'd left on mute, suddenly showed Alexander's face. Caroline turned up the volume to hear a reporter outside Wright Investments headquarters. CEO Alexander Wright declined specific comment on the allegations, but issued a statement claiming full cooperation with regulatory authorities. This comes amid rumors of marital troubles, as Victoria Wright was notably absent from last month's charity gala, with sources close to the couple suggesting they are living separately. The camera cut to Alexander entering a black town car, his expression guarded and tense. Gone was the arrogant confidence that had once defined him. In its place was the tight-lipped defensiveness of a man under siege. Caroline felt no satisfaction in his troubles. The anger that had once fueled her had long since transformed into focused determination to build something meaningful. Alexander's choices and their consequences were his own burden to bear. The following morning brought an unexpected email to Caroline's corporate account. The sender, Alexander Wright. The subject line, "Long overdue personal matters." Caroline stared at the notification, her finger hovering over the delete button. After a moment's hesitation, she opened it. "Caroline, our paths have diverged significantly since we last spoke privately. Recent events have prompted reflection on past decisions. There are personal matters we should discuss that have gone unaddressed for too long. Would you consider meeting? Alexander." The carefully worded message revealed nothing specific, but Caroline understood immediately. He had connected the dots about Olivia. Whether motivated by genuine regret or simply seeking a distraction from his current troubles remained unclear. Without response, Caroline deleted the email and focused instead on the Foster Innovation quarterly report that showed their sustainable building materials division had exceeded growth projections by 30%. This was where her energy belonged, not in reopening old wounds. 2 weeks later, Foster Innovation reached another milestone when the company's valuation officially surpassed Wright Investments for the first time. The Wall Street Journal noted the development with a modest article on page 3 of the business section. Foster Innovation overtakes Wright in market cap as sustainable materials sector booms. Caroline received the news during her weekly development meeting, silently acknowledging the symmetry without comment to her team. The validation felt significant, but ultimately secondary to the real accomplishments: creating sustainable products, building an ethical workplace, raising extraordinary daughters. That evening, Caroline took a rare detour on her way home, driving past the now closed Magnolia Diner where her journey had begun. The building stood empty, windows papered over, awaiting renovation into upscale apartments. For a moment, she could almost see her younger self in that faded burgundy uniform, unaware that her greatest humiliation would become the catalyst for extraordinary transformation. On impulse, Caroline called her real estate director. "The old Magnolia Diner building on Clark Street. Is it available for purchase?" 3 days later, Foster Innovation acquired the property with plans to transform it into a sustainable business incubator specifically for single parents with entrepreneurial ambitions. The project would include on-site childcare, flexible workspaces, and mentorship programs modeled after the support Caroline had wished for during her darkest days. June brought another email from Alexander, this one more direct. "I've seen pictures of Olivia Foster in press coverage of Foster Innovation events. The resemblance is undeniable. We need to discuss this situation urgently." Again, Caroline deleted the message without response. Olivia's parentage was a conversation she would have when her daughter was ready, not when it suddenly became convenient for Alexander to acknowledge his abandoned child. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Caroline watched Olivia demonstrating her latest innovation to her younger sister, a fabric that changed color based on environmental toxins, potentially revolutionizing environmental testing in developing regions. The pride that swelled within her was untainted by any need for external validation. "Mom, do you think we could test this at Foster next week?" Olivia asked, her mind already racing ahead to practical applications. "Absolutely," Caroline replied. "Dr. Patel has been asking about your summer projects anyway." As Olivia excitedly outlined her testing protocols, Caroline's phone buzzed with a news notification. Victoria Wright files for divorce, cites public humiliation amid corporate scandal. Caroline silenced the alert without opening it. Alexander's crumbling marriage and corporate troubles belonged to a different world, one that no longer held any power over her life or happiness. The Forbes that had once celebrated Alexander Wright as the prodigy of Wall Street now prepared a cover story about Caroline Foster, without knowing that the Tech Green Summit in 3 months would be the stage for the business world's most explosive confrontation of the year. The Forbes that had once celebrated Alexander Wright as the prodigy of Wall Street now prepared a cover story about Caroline Foster, without knowing that the Tech Green Summit in 3 months would be the stage for the business world's most explosive confrontation of the year. But before that reckoning would come, Caroline had one final season of preparation. 15 years of building something from nothing, culminating in what business analysts were already calling the most impressive sustainable business transformation of the decade. From her corner office on the top floor of Foster Innovation headquarters, Caroline gazed out at the Chicago skyline bathed in the golden light of late June. The view was remarkably similar to the one she'd seen from Alexander's office that fateful day, except now she was the one behind the desk, commanding an enterprise valued at $1.2 billion. The soft knock at her door broke her reverie. Olivia entered, tablet in hand, her 15-year-old frame already approaching Caroline's height. The years had only strengthened the resemblance to Alexander, the proud profile, the commanding presence, while her analytical mind and compassionate spirit were uniquely her own. "The final preparations for the Tech Green Summit are complete," Olivia announced, her voice carrying the assurance of someone twice her age. "Our exhibition booth will be the largest at the event, 3,000 square feet of interactive demonstrations showcasing all our core technologies." Caroline smiled, studying her daughter with quiet pride. The child Alexander had dismissed as a problem had blossomed into a brilliant young woman who already held 2 patents in her own name and had been accepted to Princeton on full academic scholarship, 3 years ahead of her peers. "What about the West Coast investors? Have they confirmed their attendance?" Caroline asked, moving to the conference table where architectural renderings of their summit installation were spread out. Olivia consulted her tablet with practiced efficiency. "All confirmed. And there's more good news. Eco Ventures has increased their offer to $300 million for the minority stake. Their CEO specifically mentioned our biodegradable medical textiles as the game changer that justified the valuation boost." Caroline nodded, the number registering as both validation and responsibility. $300 million, nearly 60,000 times the amount Alexander had tossed at her to solve the problem of their unborn child. "And," Olivia continued, her eyes bright with excitement, "Business America confirmed you'll receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award during the summit's gala dinner. The editor called personally to say the vote was unanimous." This news gave Caroline pause. The award represented the pinnacle of industry recognition, an unequivocal statement that she had earned her place among America's business elite. 15 years of 18-hour days, of choosing fabrics over sleep, of studying balance sheets while her daughters napped, all of it acknowledged at last. "We should celebrate," Caroline suggested, suddenly wanting to mark the moment with the person who had been her constant motivation. How about dinner at Evergreen? Just us. Perfect, Olivia agreed. But first, Eleanor wants us in the development lab. Dr. Patel thinks they've had a breakthrough with the moisture-reactive polymer. As they walked through the open concept office, employees smiled and nodded respectfully. Caroline had built a corporate culture unlike any other, collaborative rather than competitive, innovative rather than hierarchical. 80% of senior positions were held by women, many of whom had started as entry-level employees with limited options. Foster Innovation regularly topped best places to work lists with its on-site childcare, education assistance, and family-friendly policies cited as industry-leading. Later that evening, Caroline stood in her walk-in closet while her stylist, Maria, made final adjustments to the Oscar de la Renta gown she would wear to the awards gala. "You'll need to decide on jewelry," Maria noted, pinning a section of midnight blue fabric. The neckline would showcase a statement piece beautifully. Caroline studied her reflection thoughtfully. At 41, she radiated a confidence that made her more striking than conventionally beautiful. The years had etched fine lines around her eyes, evidence of both laughter and determination, while her once perpetually exhausted expression had been replaced by alert intelligence. Her chestnut hair, previously always constrained in a hasty ponytail, now fell in elegant waves past her shoulders. "I'll wear the sapphire pendant Olivia gave me for Christmas," she decided. "Nothing else necessary." As Maria packed up her supplies, Caroline's phone chimed with a notification. The Tech Green Summit's final participant list had been distributed. Scanning quickly through the featured speakers and exhibitors, a name near the bottom made her pause. Alexander Wright, CEO, Wright Investments, panel speaker, recovering corporate reputation through sustainable practices. The irony was almost too perfect. After 2 years of scandal and declining market share, Alexander was attempting to rehabilitate his image through the very field Caroline had pioneered. Whether the summit organizers understood the connection between them was unclear, but the potential for encounter after 15 years sent an unexpected ripple of emotion through her. Caroline set the phone aside, refusing to allow Alexander's virtual presence to disrupt her evening. Through her bedroom window, she could see Olivia in the garden, reading a scientific journal with the intensity that characterized everything she did. The sight centered Caroline immediately. Regardless of what the summit might bring, her focus remained where it had always been, moving forward, not looking back. The following morning brought a flurry of activity as final preparations for the Tech Green Summit accelerated. Caroline moved through a series of high-level meetings with characteristic precision, approving the investor presentation deck, reviewing the demonstration protocols for their new biodegradable packaging technology, confirming logistics for the 120 Foster Innovation employees who would staff their exhibition. "The PR team needs to know if you want to do pre-event interviews," Megan noted during their strategy session. Business Network specifically requested an exclusive before the award announcement. Caroline considered this. Schedule 30 minutes, but focus on the technology, not personal narratives. The innovations should be the headline, not my backstory. Megan nodded, though a small smile played at her lips. "You know they'll ask anyway. Your journey from single mother working 3 jobs to billionaire CEO is irresistible to journalists." "Then they'll be disappointed," Caroline replied firmly. "Foster Innovation succeeds because of what we build, not because of personal interest stories." By early afternoon, Caroline was reviewing the final speech draft for her award acceptance when her assistant interrupted with an unusual request. "Ms. Foster, there's a Mrs. Wright on line 3. Victoria Wright. She's quite insistent about speaking with you personally." Caroline's surprise must have shown on her face. Victoria Wright, Alexander's estranged wife and Chicago socialite, had never attempted contact before. After a moment's hesitation, Caroline nodded. "Put her through." "Ms. Foster." Victoria's crisp, cultured voice carried none of the warmth her public persona projected. "I'll be direct. I understand you'll be attending the Tech Green Summit next month, as will my husband. Ex-husband, If the tabloids are accurate, Caroline corrected mildly. A cold laugh came through the line. Not yet finalized, but imminent. That's tangentially related to why I'm calling. Alexander has been making discreet inquiries about your daughter, specifically her age, academic achievements, and physical appearance. I thought you should know. Caroline's hand tightened around the receiver. And why would this concern merit a personal call from you, Mrs. Wright? Professional courtesy between women, Victoria replied smoothly. Alexander, suddenly developing paternal interest in a teenage daughter he never acknowledged, seems suspiciously timed with his company's financial troubles and our divorce proceedings. I thought you might appreciate the warning. After ending the call, Caroline sat perfectly still, processing this new information. She had always known this day might come, that Alexander might eventually recognize Olivia as valuable now that she had proven exceptional. The timing, however, spoke volumes about his motivations. That evening, as her assistant confirmed the final arrangements for the summit, Caroline found herself uncharacteristically distracted. "The limousine will pick you up at 7 on Thursday evening, Ms. Foster," the young woman noted. "The event begins at 8. Caroline nodded absently, making one final adjustment to her speech on the tablet before her. The words she had crafted were carefully measured, acknowledging her journey without dwelling on hardship, celebrating Foster Innovations' accomplishments without unnecessary personal details. Nothing in the text directly referenced Alexander or the abandonment that had inadvertently launched her path. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Olivia said from the doorway, resplendent in her first formal gown, a simple emerald design that complemented her auburn hair, not just for the award, but for everything. Caroline crossed the room to embrace her daughter, struck by how their early years of desperate struggle must seem like ancient history to Olivia now. "We did this together," she replied softly. "Every step of the way." The evening before the summit, Caroline stood before her full-length mirror, making a final assessment of her appearance. The woman who gazed back bore little resemblance to the exhausted waitress who had once stood trembling in Alexander's office. This woman commanded respect not through inheritance or connection, but through intelligence, innovation, and unflagging determination. Her phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "The car will pick me up first, then you and Olivia. Wright Investment stock dropped another 8% today after their sustainability claims were questioned by regulators. Alexander will be in quite a mood tomorrow." Caroline set the phone aside without reply. Alexander's financial troubles were no longer her concern, though she couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic balance of their reversed fortunes. The man who had once dismissed her as boring and insufficient was now struggling to maintain relevance in the very industry she had helped transform. As she turned away from the mirror, a notification appeared on her tablet. An email from an address she didn't recognize but instantly understood. A.W. Wright Impersonal. Net. The subject line read simply, "Olivia." After a moment's hesitation, Caroline opened the message. "Caroline, I'll be at the Tech Green Summit tomorrow and understand you're receiving the Entrepreneur Award. Congratulations. I've recently become aware of certain similarities between myself and your daughter Olivia that cannot be coincidental. I believe we have significant matters to discuss regarding her future and heritage. Perhaps we could arrange a private conversation during the event. Alexander." Caroline deleted the email without response, a cold certainty settling in her chest. After 15 years of absence, Alexander's sudden interest in heritage could only mean one thing. He had recognized not just a daughter, but a potential heir to salvage his faltering legacy. As she prepared for bed, Caroline paused at Olivia's door, finding her daughter still awake, meticulously reviewing her notes for the sustainable materials panel she would participate in as Foster Innovations' youth ambassador. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Caroline asked softly. Olivia looked up, her eyes, so like Caroline's own, bright with anticipation. "More than ready. I've prepared counterarguments for any potential challenges to our biodegradable electronic components data." Caroline smiled, struck by the perfect synthesis of her own resilience and Alexander's strategic mind evident in their daughter. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a big day." Little did she know as she closed Olivia's door that while she was heading to the Tech Green Summit, fate was preparing the confrontation she had both anticipated and dreaded for 15 years. Little did she know as she closed Olivia's door that while she was heading to the Tech Green Summit, fate was preparing the confrontation she had both anticipated and dreaded for 15 years. The Chicago Millennium Center gleamed under the early summer sun, its glass facade reflecting the clear blue sky as attendees streamed through the wide entrance doors. The Tech Green Summit had transformed the massive convention hall into a showcase of sustainable innovation, with emerald and azure lighting casting an otherworldly glow across exhibits that represented the future of eco-friendly technology. Caroline Foster moved through the main exhibition hall with practiced ease, her midnight blue designer suit a stark contrast to the burgundy waitress uniform she'd worn the last time she'd encountered Alexander Wright. Heads turned as she passed, recognition and respect evident in the nods and smiles she received from industry leaders who had once been untouchable icons in her former life. "Ms. Foster, the Eco Ventures team is waiting in the VIP lounge," her assistant murmured, keeping pace beside her. "They've brought their final term sheet for the minority investment." "Thank you, Emma. Please let them know I'll join them in 10 minutes. I'd like to check on our main exhibit first." Foster Innovation commanded the central position in the exhibition hall, a testament to the company's industry leadership. Caroline watched with quiet pride as Olivia guided a group of retail executives through a demonstration of their latest biodegradable packaging technology, her daughter's confidence and expertise belying her 15 years. The molecular structure allows for complete decomposition within 12 weeks in standard compost conditions, Olivia explained, manipulating a 3D molecular model on the large display screen. Unlike conventional biodegradable plastics that merely break down into microplastics, our material returns completely to organic compounds that actually enrich soil composition. The executives nodded appreciatively, one woman scribbling rapid notes. Caroline recognized her as the sustainability director for the country's largest retail chain, a potential partnership that could expand Foster Innovation's reach exponentially. "And your production capacity?" the woman asked. "Could you scale to national distribution within 6 months?" "Our new manufacturing facility in Detroit comes online next quarter," Olivia replied without hesitation. "It will triple our current capacity while maintaining carbon neutrality through our integrated solar and wind systems." Caroline felt a familiar vibration of pride. At 15, Olivia displayed more business acumen and technological understanding than most veteran executives. The child Alexander had rejected as an inconvenience had become a force that industry leaders sought out for guidance. As Caroline turned toward the VIP lounge, a peculiar electricity seemed to charge the air around her. She recognized the sensation immediately, the heightened awareness that had accompanied every major turning point in her life. Instinctively, she glanced across the crowded exhibition floor, her eyes drawn to a specific point as if by magnetic force. There, beside an artificial living wall display, stood Alexander Wright. The years had altered him in subtle ways. Silver now threaded through his temples, and his once lean frame had acquired the slight paunch common to men who spent their days in boardrooms rather than gyms. His bespoke suit, Brioni, if Caroline had to guess, couldn't quite disguise the tension evident in his posture as he conversed with a group of investors. For a suspended moment, Caroline observed him unnoticed, cataloging the changes 15 years had wrought. The arrogant confidence that had once defined his presence had diminished, replaced by something more guarded, more desperate. Even from a distance, she could see the strain in his smile, the way his eyes darted periodically to check reactions to his words. Then, as if sensing her scrutiny, Alexander looked up. Their gazes locked across the crowded space, electric recognition arcing between them. Caroline watched the progression of emotions across his face, initial confusion, dawning recognition, and finally, unmistakable shock as he fully registered her transformation from dismissed waitress to commanding CEO. She offered no acknowledgement, neither smile nor nod, maintaining eye contact for 3 calculated seconds before deliberately turning away to continue her conversation with a sustainable energy pioneer. "Caroline is revolutionizing how we think about product life cycles," the woman was saying to her colleague. "Foster Innovation has reduced landfill impact by an estimated 8 million tons last year alone." From her peripheral vision, Caroline tracked Alexander's movement as he extricated himself from his group and began making his way across the exhibition floor toward her. She concluded her conversation with unhurried poise, signing the entrepreneur's product development proposal with a fountain pen engraved with Foster Innovation's logo. "Caroline?" Alexander's voice carried a note of uncertainty entirely absent from their last encounter. "Caroline Foster?" She turned, composing her features into a mask of professional courtesy. "Alexander," she acknowledged, her tone neutral, extending her hand as she would to any business acquaintance. His handshake was firmer than necessary, a reflexive assertion of dominance that felt oddly dated. Up close, the changes in him were more pronounced. The fine lines around his eyes, the slight loosening of skin beneath his jaw, the tension that tightened his mouth. "This is unexpected," he managed, his eyes taking in her transformation, the tailored designer suit, the subtle but expensive jewelry, the confident posture of someone fully in command of her environment. "You look different." 15 years will do that, Caroline replied evenly. Alexander attempted to recapture his footing with a practiced smile. "I've been following Foster Innovation's rise. Quite impressive for he caught himself, recalibrating, "for any company, especially in such a competitive sector." Caroline observed his discomfort with clinical detachment. "Thank you. We've found that ethical innovation creates its own market advantages." An awkward silence stretched between them, 15 years of unspoken history expanding to fill the space. Alexander broke first, his business persona sliding into place like armor. "I understand congratulations are in order for the Entrepreneur of the Year award. Well deserved." His gaze swept the Foster Innovation exhibition, the crowds of interested partners, the cutting-edge displays, the team of confident professionals. "Your company has certainly made an impact." "We focus on solutions rather than accolades," Caroline replied, "though the recognition is appreciated." Alexander shifted strategy, leaning slightly closer. "Perhaps we could discuss potential synergies between our organizations. Right Investments is diversifying our portfolio towards sustainable ventures. Your expertise combined with our capital resources could create significant opportunities." The transparent attempt to establish connection through business validated everything Eleanor had predicted. Alexander wasn't seeking reconciliation. He was hunting for a lifeline as his own company floundered. Before Caroline could respond, Olivia appeared at her side, tablet in hand, completely unaware of the seismic significance of the interaction she was interrupting. "Mom, the committee for the award ceremony is requesting your presence backstage for technical preparations," she said, her focus on the schedule before her. "They need 20 minutes for sound check and lighting adjustments." The effect on Alexander was immediate and profound. His entire body tensed as his gaze fixed on Olivia, traveling from her auburn hair to her confident posture, cataloging the unmistakable familial features, the same aristocratic profile he saw in family portraits, and more tellingly, in his own mirror. "This is..." Alexander's voice faltered, mathematical calculation evident in his expression as he processed Olivia's apparent age. "This is my daughter, Olivia Foster," Caroline said smoothly. "Olivia is our Director of Innovation and has just been accepted to Princeton's Advanced Science program." "Your daughter," Alexander repeated, the words barely audible as his complexion paled visibly. Caroline watched recognition dawn in his eyes. the understanding that the problem he had paid to eliminate had instead grown into an extraordinary young woman who now stood before him, unknowingly facing her biological father. Olivia, this is Alexander Wright, CEO of Wright Investments, an old acquaintance. With the poised grace that characterized her every action, Olivia extended her hand. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Wright. I read about your company's difficulties in the Financial Times. I hope you're able to address the 40% stock decline following the greenwashing investigation. Alexander accepted the handshake automatically, visibly struggling to process both Olivia's existence and her casual reference to his company's disgrace. The reports have been exaggerated, he managed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face, searching for and undoubtedly finding reflections of himself. The convention center speakers announced the imminent start of the awards ceremony, providing Caroline with a natural exit. If you'll excuse us, we're needed backstage. As they walked away, Caroline felt Alexander's gaze boring into her back, the weight of 15 years of questions suddenly pressing for answers. The awards ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. Industry leaders received recognition for innovations in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and circular manufacturing. When Caroline's category was announced, the massive screens displayed Foster Innovation's journey from startup to industry leader, highlighting the company's revolutionary materials and progressive workplace policies. And the Entrepreneur of the Year award goes to Caroline Foster for transforming the sustainable materials sector while creating one of America's most progressive workplaces. The applause was thunderous as Caroline took the stage, accepting the crystal trophy with gracious dignity. From the podium, she could see Alexander in the middle distance, standing completely still amid the applauding crowd, his expression unreadable. 15 years ago, I began Foster Innovation at a kitchen table with a second-hand sewing machine and a newborn daughter, Caroline began, her voice steady and clear. I was told at the time by someone who considered himself my superior that I was insufficient, boring, without potential. A ripple moved through the audience, the irresistible electricity of personal revelation from someone usually so private about her background. Today, Foster Innovation employs more than 400 people, has revolutionized 3 industries with our sustainable materials patents, and has just closed an investment round of $300 million. Caroline's voice grew stronger with each accomplishment listed. And my daughter, Olivia, the reason behind everything we've built, has just been accepted to Princeton at 15 with a full merit scholarship. The applause swelled again, Olivia beaming from the front row while Alexander's face seemed to grow more ashen with each word. After the ceremony concluded, Alexander intercepted Caroline with barely contained urgency as she moved through the congratulatory crowd. "Caroline, we need to speak privately." His voice was low, tense with controlled desperation. "About Olivia. I had no idea you went through with the pregnancy. She is obviously a foster," Caroline completed firmly, "in every way that matters." "I have rights," Alexander hissed, lowering his voice further as guests moved past them. "I'm her father." Caroline allowed herself a small, cold smile that never reached her eyes. Interesting how $5,000 to solve a problem can transform into paternal rights when the daughter you rejected becomes the heir to a billion-dollar empire, isn't it, Alexander? The truth fell between them like a sentencing, the nearby circle of CEOs and investors falling silent as they registered the implications of her words. Shocked murmurs spread outward like ripples in still water. "You can't do this," Alexander whispered, his face flushing with humiliation. "I'm not doing anything beyond stating facts," Caroline replied calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have potential investors to meet, people who value integrity as much as profitability." While the murmurs of shock spread through the gathering of business elites, Alexander Wright failed to realize that his public humiliation was merely the opening act. The morning headlines would bring consequences that would permanently alter the power balance he had taken for granted for 15 years. While the murmurs of shock spread through the gathering of business elites, Alexander Wright failed to realize that his public humiliation was merely the opening act. The morning headlines would bring consequences that would permanently alter the power balance he had taken for granted for 15 years. The video, captured discreetly by a venture capitalist with his smartphone, spread through business circles with astonishing speed. By midnight, it had reached the inboxes of every major financial publication's editors. By dawn, it had been viewed by board members of Wright Investments and their largest institutional investors. CEO Alexander Wright exposed for abandoning prodigy daughter and rejecting entrepreneur mother, screamed the headline on Business Insider's Morning Alert. The accompanying article detailed how the once celebrated financial wunderkind had offered hush money to a pregnant waitress 15 years ago, only to have that same woman build a billion-dollar enterprise while raising the child he'd rejected. In the presidential suite of the Four Seasons, Caroline closed her laptop, shutting out the cascade of notifications. She hadn't anticipated the confrontation being captured, much less going viral within financial circles. The truth had been weaponized by the internet's relentless efficiency, but she felt no satisfaction in Alexander's public dismantling. "Mom?" Olivia stood in the doorway of the suite's living area, still in her pajamas despite the late morning hour. Her expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable, her usual confidence replaced by quiet confusion. Caroline's heart constricted. In the rush of events following the confrontation, she hadn't had time to speak privately with Olivia, who had been whisked away to a young innovator's reception immediately after the awards ceremony. "Come sit with me." Caroline patted the space beside her on the plush sofa. "I think we have a conversation that's long overdue." Olivia moved to join her, tablet in hand. "He's been trying to contact me," she said without preamble, displaying the screen showing multiple social media notifications. Alexander Wright sent connection requests on 3 platforms with a message saying he's always regretted not being part of my life and would like to meet me. Her voice remained steady, analytical even in emotional terrain. He also mentioned something about family legacy and succession rights. Caroline wasn't surprised. With Wright Investments hemorrhaging value and reputation after the sustainability scandals, the discovery of a brilliant heir connected to a thriving billion-dollar company represented a potential salvation. "What I need to know," Olivia continued, her eyes, so like Caroline's own, fixed intently on her mother's face, "is why you never told me who he was." Caroline took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Because he made his choice very clear 15 years ago. He didn't want to be your father. He didn't want either of us in his life." "Because I was inconvenient," Olivia said, the words not a question but a statement of fact gleaned from the viral video. "Because he was selfish," Caroline corrected gently. "Not because of anything lacking in you, never that. You were perfect from the moment you existed." Olivia processed this with the same methodical consideration she applied to complex equations. What happened exactly? The full story, not the sanitized version. For the next hour, Caroline shared the unvarnished truth. The brief relationship, the pregnancy, Alexander's cruel dismissal, the struggle to survive as a single mother, and the determination that had fueled Foster Innovations' creation. Throughout the telling, Olivia remained silent, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions with remarkable composure. "So Foster Innovation exists because he rejected us," Olivia finally said, a slight smile touching her lips. "Statistically speaking, his decision to dismiss you as insufficient represents perhaps the worst return on investment in modern business history." Despite the heaviness of the moment, Caroline laughed. Her daughter's ability to reframe emotional wounds through rational analysis was both endearing and impressive. "Do you hate him?" Olivia asked abruptly. Caroline considered the question seriously. "No," she answered truthfully. "I stopped hating him years ago. Hatred requires energy I needed elsewhere. What I feel now is nothing. He's irrelevant to our lives except as a historical footnote." Olivia nodded, seemingly satisfied with this assessment. "And what should I do about his messages?" "That's entirely your decision," Caroline replied. "You're old enough to choose whether you want any connection with him. I won't stand in the way if you're curious about knowing him, but I want you to be prepared for the likelihood that his sudden interest is strategically motivated." "Because I'm valuable now," Olivia concluded shrewdly, "as a potential heir to salvage his failing company." "Exactly." The afternoon brought a fresh cascade of media inquiries, all of which Caroline's PR team deflected with professional efficiency. Eleanor Matthews called to offer both congratulations on the award and tactical advice on handling the unexpected publicity. "The board is united behind you," Eleanor assured her. "This changes nothing about Foster Innovation's trajectory. If anything, it humanizes the brand, the founder who succeeded despite every obstacle." Caroline was reviewing investor term sheets when the hotel concierge called to announce a visitor in the lobby, Alexander Wright, requesting 5 minutes of her time. "He's brought gifts," the concierge added diplomatically. "Quite a large, stuffed animal and flowers." Caroline sighed. The gesture was so transparently misguided it would have been comical under other circumstances. "Please inform Mr. Wright that Olivia is at school, where she should be on every day he's missed for the past 15 years. Despite the rebuff, Alexander appeared at the Four Seasons again the following morning, catching Caroline as she exited the elevator into the lobby. He looked markedly different from the conference. Gone was the polished CEO veneer, replaced by a haggard desperation that even his expensive suit couldn't disguise. "Caroline, please," he began, stepping directly into her path. "5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." She regarded him with the detached assessment of someone studying an artifact from a former life. "My car is waiting, Alexander." "We can talk while walking," he persisted, falling into step beside her as she moved toward the exit. "The situation has gotten out of hand. The video, the press, it's damaging for everyone involved." "For you, perhaps," Caroline corrected mildly. "Foster Innovation's stock is up 12% since yesterday." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about business. It's about Olivia. About making things right." Caroline stopped, turning to face him directly. "Making things right? You can't seriously believe that's possible." "I didn't know," Alexander insisted, lowering his voice as hotel guests passed nearby. "I didn't know you kept the baby. If you had known Olivia would become a scientific prodigy headed to Princeton, that she would help build a billion-dollar company, would that have changed your calculation about her value?" Caroline's voice remained even, but her eyes hardened. "You made your position perfectly clear 15 years ago. Olivia was a problem with a $5,000 solution." Alexander's expression shifted to one of calculated reasonableness. "People change, Caroline. I've had time to reflect on past mistakes. I can compensate for the lost years, provide opportunities, connections that even your impressive success can't match." "Compensate," Caroline repeated incredulously. "You think you can compensate for 15 years of absence? 15 birthdays, Christmases, school performances, the nights she had fever and I rocked her alone, her first steps, first words, everything you discarded as worthless?" He attempted a different approach, his business negotiation skills surfacing. "My attorneys have confirmed I have legal rights. I can request DNA testing and initiate paternity recognition proceedings." Caroline smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. "Go ahead. Your attorneys should also have informed you that family courts consider the child's best interests above all. Judges don't typically sympathize with fathers who tried to bribe mothers into abortions and then disappeared for 15 years only to reappear when the child becomes potentially valuable to them." "So it's about money then?" Alexander's face flushed with frustration. "Name your price. What do you want to make this go away quietly?" The insult was breathtaking in its obliviousness. Caroline straightened to her full height, her designer suit and confident bearing a stark contrast to the frightened waitress who had once stood trembling in his office. "My company is worth more than yours, Alexander. My daughter has a brighter future than yours ever was. I don't need your money. I never did." His expression shifted from frustrated to calculating. "What do you want then?" "Nothing," Caroline answered simply. "That's the point you never understood. I built a life that has no space for you. Olivia will decide when she reaches legal age if she wishes to know you. Until then, I suggest you work on becoming someone worth knowing." Alexander's reply was cut short by the arrival of Caroline's driver, creating a natural end to the confrontation. As she settled into the back seat of the Tesla, she caught a glimpse of Alexander through the tinted window, a man suddenly diminished, standing alone amid the bustling hotel entrance. 3 weeks later, Caroline watched from her penthouse as financial news reported Alexander Wright's resignation as CEO of Wright Investments, following board pressure related to ethical concerns. The stock had fallen another 20% after institutional investors withdrew following the viral video controversy. His wife's divorce filing, citing public humiliation among the grounds, had become front-page fodder for both business publications and tabloids alike. Olivia entered Caroline's home office carrying the prototype of her latest biodegradable fabric innovation, a material that would soon project Foster innovation into international markets previously untapped. "The European distributors confirmed?" Olivia asked, setting the prototype on Caroline's desk. Caroline closed the news screen displaying Alexander's downfall. "Just signed the contracts this morning. Paris, Milan, and Berlin in the next quarter." Olivia beamed. "We should celebrate. Just us two, like always." "Like always was enough," Caroline completed, embracing her daughter. That evening, while Alexander Wright emptied his executive office under the disapproving gazes of former colleagues, Caroline and Olivia toasted with orange juice at the restaurant where everything had begun, the Magnolia Diner, now owned by Foster Innovation and transformed into a sustainable cafe that employed single mothers with subsidized career advancement programs. The waitress, dismissed as insignificant, hadn't merely survived, she had thrived. And her sweetest victory wasn't the empire she had built, but the full life that Alexander could never claim participation in. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.